In medieval times, some of the priciest superfoods weren't exotic spices or rare fruits. They were the very plants people step over today without a second glance. So, what could possibly make these common weeds so valuable centuries ago? Those bright yellow flowers covering your lawn every spring were once traded for actual money in medieval markets across Europe. Dandelions. Medieval people basically worshipped what modern suburbanites declare war on every weekend. Every single part mattered tremendously to medieval survival and daily nutrition. The leaves went into salads when fresh greens meant the difference between health and sickness. Young leaves tasted mild and slightly bitter, perfect for adding to spring meals without overwhelming delicate palates. However, older leaves packed more punch but needed cooking to become edible. Meanwhile, the roots got dug up in fall when they stored the most energy and nutrients for the harsh winter months ahead. But here's where it gets interesting. Those roots became coffee substitute during times of scarcity. Medieval people roasted dandelion roots until they turned dark brown, then ground them into powder. They basically invented artisanal coffee using weeds from their front yard. Hot water poured over the grounds created a bitter drink that woke people up and warmed them during cold mornings when real coffee was impossible to find or afford. The flowers weren't just pretty decorations either. They got tossed into soups and stews for color and nutrition. Think of adding sunshine to your bowl. In fact, the petals contained vitamins while the green parts added minerals that medieval diets desperately needed. Dandelions were like nature's multivitamin that grew everywhere except where people actually wanted them. Why did people pay real coins for something that grows everywhere? Vitamin content. Dandelions deliver more vitamin A than carrots, more vitamin C than oranges, plus vitamin K for strong bones and calcium for healthy teeth. Medieval people didn't know the science, but they knew eating dandelions made them feel stronger and more energetic during difficult times. Beyond that, the timing worked perfectly. Dandelions pop up in early spring when stored winter food is running low and people need fresh nutrition badly. That first taste of something green and alive after months of preserved meat and grain porridge brought hope and health to struggling families. But dandelions weren't the only plants that delivered serious nutrition along with a bit of pain. Stinging nettles earned their name honestly through centuries of human contact. Touch them wrong and tiny hairs inject chemicals that burn your skin for hours. Medieval people considered this a fair price for accessing one of the most nutritious plants on earth. They basically treated nettle patches like spicy restaurants, painful going in, totally worth it afterward. Young nettle leaves picked in early spring were pure nutrition gold for struggling families. More iron than spinach, more protein than most vegetables, vitamins A and C packed into every bite. Medieval people, especially women, suffered from iron-poor blood constantly due to poor diets and frequent pregnancies. Fortunately, nettles fixed that problem better than anything else available in their harsh world. Now, the trick was timing and technique that took years to master. Only the youngest, most tender leaves were worth the effort and risk of stinging. Older leaves got tough and bitter, plus the stinging got worse as plants matured through the growing season. Smart foragers wore thick gloves and long sleeves, then grabbed handfuls of young shoots before the plants knew what hit them. Medieval people basically invented extreme gardening before extreme sports were even a thing. Cooking neutralized the sting completely through a simple boiling process. Boiling water destroyed those nasty little hairs while keeping all the good nutrition intact. What came out tasted like mild spinach with extra vitamins. No burning, no pain, just healthy green vegetables that cost nothing except some careful harvesting and a few temporary welts. Medieval cooks dried nettles in summer to save them for winter meals when fresh food disappeared. Dried nettles lost their sting, but kept their nutrition perfectly preserved for months. Having dried nettles stored meant having iron and vitamins available during the months when fresh food disappeared and people got weak from poor diets. Furthermore, nettles worked as medicine too. Fresh nettle poultices got applied to sore joints and aching muscles. The same compounds that caused stinging actually reduced inflammation when used correctly. Medieval people figured out how to make plants hurt them twice, once during harvest, once during treatment. This double pain somehow made sense to medieval medical thinking. Of course, not every valuable medieval green required protective gear. Chickweed looks completely harmless sprawling across the ground with tiny white flowers and delicate green leaves that seem almost decorative. Medieval people discovered this innocent-looking plant was actually nutritional treasure hiding in plain sight all around their settlements. While everyone else was getting stung by nettles, smart people were quietly harvesting nature's salad bar. Everything goes in your mouth without any preparation or cooking required. Leaves, stems, flowers, the whole plant. The taste is mild and slightly sweet, nothing like the bitter greens most people expect from wild plants. Even better, medieval children actually enjoyed eating chickweed, which solved the eternal problem of getting kids to eat their vegetables without bribes or threats of punishment. Finally, a wild plant that didn't fight back or taste like punishment. Spring chickweed provided that crucial first taste of fresh nutrition after long winters of stored foods that often spoiled. Vitamin C to prevent teeth from falling out. Beta-carotene for healthy eyes during dark months. Minerals that strengthen bones weakened by months of poor winter diets. All growing freely in every disturbed patch of soil around medieval villages and farms where people lived and worked. Naturally, medieval cooks used chickweed everywhere in their limited but creative cooking repertoire and daily meal planning. Raw in salads when you wanted something fresh and crunchy to break the monotony. Cooked in soups and stews where it wilted down and added nutrition without changing flavors. Even mixed into porridge for extra vitamins and a bit of green color. It was basically the medieval equivalent of sneaking vegetables into kids' food, except the kids actually liked it. Yet, chickweed worked as medicine too during an era of limited medical knowledge. Fresh chickweed rubbed directly on cuts, scrapes, and insect bites provided cooling relief during an era when medical care was primitive. The plant contains natural compounds that reduce inflammation and help healing. Medieval mothers kept chickweed locations memorized for emergency first aid during daily accidents and injuries. Additionally, markets sold chickweed for both food and medicine throughout the growing season when fresh ingredients were available. The plant stayed fresh longer than most greens, making it valuable for traders who needed to transport goods without spoilage. Merchants could harvest chickweed in one location and sell it days later in distant markets without worrying about spoilage or loss of nutritional value. But if you wanted serious nutritional power packed into small packages, purslane grows in the worst conditions imaginable and somehow manages to be more nutritious than expensive vegetables that require careful cultivation and constant attention. This thick-leafed succulent thrives in poor soil, hot weather, and places where nothing else wants to survive. Medieval people basically found the overachiever of the plant world growing in their garbage dumps. The leaves and stems crunch like tiny water balloons when you bite them, releasing their stored moisture in a refreshing burst. That juicy texture made purslane perfect for adding to stews and pies where it provided nutrition plus natural thickening. The slight lemony flavor brightened up heavy medieval dishes that could get pretty boring after months of eating the same ingredients over and over again. It was like nature's way of putting pop rocks in your salad, except healthy. Here's the amazing part, though, that modern nutritionists are just beginning to understand. Purslane contains more omega-3 fatty acids than most fish that medieval people rarely had access to. Those healthy fats that modern people spend fortunes trying to get from supplements and expensive seafood. Medieval people were getting them free from a weed that volunteered to grow anywhere humans had disturbed the earth through farming or construction. What's more, purslane packed vitamins A, C, and E into its succulent leaves and tender stems, magnesium for strong muscles and healthy hearts, all packed into a plant that required zero care, zero watering, and zero fertilizer to thrive magnificently in harsh conditions. Purslane actually preferred poor soil and neglect to fancy gardening techniques, the plant world's ultimate low-maintenance friend that thrived on neglect like a medieval teenager. Medieval timing worked perfectly with natural growing cycles that favored hot weather plants. While other greens wilted and died in summer heat, purslane was just getting started with its best growth. July sun that killed lettuce and spinach made purslane grow faster and tastier. This meant fresh, nutritious greens available during the hottest months when people needed cooling foods and extra hydration most desperately. Harvesting required no special skills or tools whatsoever, making it accessible to everyone regardless of experience. Just grab the thick stems and pull gently from the ground. The plants broke cleanly and regrew from remaining roots buried in the soil. One patch could provide multiple harvests throughout the growing season without replanting or any special care. Speaking of plants that added serious flavor to bland medieval meals, sorrel tastes like someone mixed spinach with lemon juice and added a hint of tart green apple for good measure. That sharp, tangy bite comes from natural acids that made medieval food actually interesting to eat instead of just survival fuel. When your daily menu consists of porridge and more porridge, finding something that tastes like it has an attitude becomes precious. The sourness packed serious vitamin C content that rivaled any citrus fruit available to wealthy merchants. Enough to prevent scurvy during long winters when fresh food disappeared for months at a time. Medieval people didn't understand vitamins, but they knew eating sorrel kept their teeth from falling out and their energy levels up during the darkest months when depression often set in. It was basically medieval people's version of sour candy, except it actually prevented dental disasters. That sharp flavor cut through heavy, fatty medieval dishes perfectly like a knife through butter or lard. Rich meat stews got brightness from chopped sorrel leaves. Thick-grained porridges became edible with sorrel mixed in for flavor and nutrition. Plus, the natural acidity also helped preserve other foods when cooked together, making precious ingredients last longer during times of scarcity and food shortages. Medieval markets paid good money for sorrel because it served as both food and medicine in one convenient package. The high vitamin content meant it functioned as health insurance you could eat every day without side effects. Smart medieval families grew sorrel in their gardens while also collecting wild sorrel from meadows and forest clearings throughout the growing season when weather permitted foraging expeditions. Seasonal preparation varied by intended use and availability of fresh ingredients that changed with the weather. Spring sorrel was tender enough to eat raw in salads where the sourness added excitement to simple greens. Summer sorrel got cooked into soups and sauces where the acidity mellowed into complex, tangy flavors that made ordinary ingredients taste special and memorable instead of bland. Nevertheless, medieval cooks learned to balance sorrel's intensity carefully through trial and error that sometimes ruined entire meals. Too much sorrel made dishes inedibly sour and ruined expensive ingredients that families couldn't afford to waste. Just the right amount transformed boring medieval food into something people actually looked forward to eating. Finding the right amount was like medieval cooking's version of walking a tightrope, except falling meant ruining dinner instead of breaking bones. Fall sorrel was often preserved by drying for winter use when fresh foods became scarce and expensive to purchase. But when medical emergency struck, another common weed provided immediate help. Plantain earned the nickname nature's bandage because it grew everywhere humans walked. Medieval people basically had medical supplies sprouting from their sidewalks. Fresh plantain leaves applied directly to wounds stopped bleeding and reduced pain almost immediately. Medieval mothers taught children to recognize plantain for treating their own scraped knees. It was like having a first aid kit that followed you around and grew wherever you might fall down. But plantain wasn't just external medicine. Similarly, the seeds offered different benefits as natural digestive medicine. Clearly, smart medieval people learned to use both varieties. The growing pattern made plantain incredibly reliable. Plantain was basically the plant world's version of that friend who gets stronger every time life tries to crush them. Plantain stayed green and usable much longer than most plants, moving from emergency medicine to serious long-term nutrition. Lamb's quarters grow so enthusiastically that medieval farmers probably cursed it as a weed until they discovered its nutritional secret. Medieval people basically had premium nutrition volunteering to grow in their compost piles. The leaves taste like mild spinach crossed with chard. Young leaves work perfectly in salads. It was like spinach's more talented cousin that didn't require any gardening skills to grow. Medieval nutrition often lacked adequate protein, especially for poor people who couldn't afford meat regularly. Importantly, the vitamin A content supported eye health during long, dark winters. Vitamin C prevented teeth from falling out. Medieval cooks discovered that lamb's quarters worked as a perfect spinach substitute. It was basically nature's way of providing backup spinach for when your garden failed, which happened a lot in medieval times. But when medieval people wanted to add serious flavor without expensive spices, garlic mustard delivers exactly what the name promises. Sharp garlic bite combined with peppery mustard heat. Medieval people basically found nature's spice cabinet growing free in the forest. Every part packs a serious taste. The leaves provide garlic mustard punch that could wake up any dish. It was like having a whole spice rack condensed into one aggressive plant that grew everywhere. The vitamin C content rivaled exotic citrus fruits that most medieval people never saw. Throughout the year, medieval cooks used garlic mustard strategically. Spring brought tender young leaves perfect for fresh applications. The flavor intensity meant a little went a long way. It was the medieval equivalent of hot sauce. A tiny amount could transform an entire meal from bland to memorable. And speaking of plants that provided substantial nutrition from their underground storage, burdock produces those annoying sticky burrs that attach to clothing and drive everyone crazy. Medieval people basically discovered that nature's most annoying practical joke was hiding dinner underground. Those massive roots, sometimes as thick as carrots and twice as long, provided serious calories when food was scarce. It was like finding buried treasure, except the treasure was edible and the map was just following the most irritating plant in the forest. The entire plant offered food value at different stages. Before putting energy into making those irritating seed burrs, young burdock shoots provided tender greens. The storage potential made burdock incredibly valuable during harsh winters. On the other hand, the harvesting required serious effort and planning. Harvesting burdock was basically medieval CrossFit. You got a serious workout and dinner at the same time. But for nutrition, it was impossible to miss growing everywhere. Clover spreads across meadows and lawns in thick, protein-packed carpets that medieval people turned into food, medicine, and natural sweeteners. Medieval people basically had edible lawn covering every available patch of ground. The flowers provided precious sweetness when honey was expensive and sugar didn't exist yet. It was like having a candy factory growing wild, except the candy was actually good for you. The leaves delivered the real nutritional punch. More protein than most other wild greens, plus vitamins A and C packed into every 3-leaf cluster. Different clover species offered different advantages. The red clover had larger, more substantial flowers and leaves. Clover was basically nature's buffet. You could pick your preferred flavor and texture from the same general area. Furthermore, the seeds added another layer of value. But some medieval plants required more careful handling to unlock their benefits. Field bindweed wraps its aggressive vines around everything in sight, creating tangled messes that modern gardeners consider pure evil. Medieval people basically turned garden enemy number one into survival food. The roots contain substantial protein, but they require careful preparation to be safe. It was like nature's way of making you work for your dinner by requiring actual cooking skills. Seeds provided safer nutrition with less preparation needed. The small, hard seeds could be ground into flour or cooked like tiny grains. In practice, the harvesting strategy required planning and caution. Harvesting bindweed was basically doing garden cleanup and grocery shopping at the same time. Timing was crucial for both safety and nutrition, but not every valuable medieval plant required such careful handling. Violet leaves and flowers transformed medieval meals from basic survival food into something approaching elegant dining. Medieval people basically had gourmet ingredients growing wild that looked prettier than anything in fancy modern restaurants. The flowers were pure magic for medieval cooking. Violet flowers got candied with precious honey to create treats. It was like having edible decorations that actually improved the taste instead of just looking pretty. Fresh violet leaves provided serious vitamin C content that helped prevent scurvy during long winters. Depending on the season, medieval cooks used violet leaves both raw and cooked. Young, tender leaves went into salads. The flowers created natural food coloring centuries before artificial dyes existed. Violets were basically nature's art supply store that you could also eat, moving from delicate flowers to serious fruit production. Blackberry brambles defend their precious fruits with armor of thorns that can shred clothing and draw blood. Medieval people basically played extreme sports every time they wanted dessert. Those dark purple berries delivered vitamin C, fiber, and antioxidants that were essential for health. It was like nature's way of making you earn your fruit by surviving a botanical obstacle course. Smart medieval people preserved most of their blackberry harvest for winter use. Drying blackberries concentrated their nutrition and created portable food. The leaves weren't wasted either. Blackberry leaf tea was believed to help with digestive problems. Even the parts that couldn't hurt you were still useful, which was probably a relief after dealing with all those thorns. Medieval markets paid premium prices for fresh blackberries during their short summer season. But for those who wanted their warm drinks to provide actual health benefits, chicory produces bright blue flowers along roadsides and fields, but its real treasure grows underground. Medieval people basically invented healthy coffee centuries before coffee shops existed on every corner. The roasted roots produced dark, bitter drinks that satisfied the desire for something warm and flavorful. It was like medieval barista training, except the beans grew in ditches and nobody complained about the foam art. The roots contained inulin, a special fiber that supported digestive health in ways medieval people could observe. Chicory provided more than just coffee substitutes. The leaves offered additional nutritional value throughout the growing season. Medieval cultivation and wild harvesting both contributed to chicory supplies. Wild chicory was basically the craft beer of medieval coffee substitutes. Stronger, more complex, and you had to work harder to get it. And for our final plant that combined intense flavor with serious medicine, Fennel brings sweet licorice flavors to dishes using a plant that grew wild across medieval Europe. Medieval people basically discovered nature had created its own spice cabinet growing free in abandoned fields. The seeds provided the most concentrated value and could transform bland medieval food into something people actually wanted to eat. Fennel seeds were basically medieval breath mints that also happened to be medicine and seasoning all in one tiny package. Fresh fennel fronds added delicate anise flavor to salads, soups, and stews without overwhelming other ingredients. Medieval trade valued fennel seeds highly because they stored well, traveled without spoiling, and provided both culinary and medicinal benefits. Fennel was like the Swiss Army knife of medieval spices, one plant that did the job of multiple expensive imports. Finally, the vitamin C content supported immune health, while potassium helped with muscle and heart function. These 15 plants represent just the beginning of understanding how medieval people turned common weeds into nutritional foundations that supported entire communities through challenging times.